Shalom Chevra. So the 3 weeks is a very special time in the Jewish calendar. And like the simple understanding is that it's a sad time, it's a tragic time, it's a horrible time. It's a time to essentially tap into the worst parts of what it means to be part of the Jewish story. But there's so many deeper layers here. And what I want to do is I want to briefly delve into some of the absolute depth of this very powerful time in the Jewish story, but particularly in the trajectory from, let's say, the yearly cycle to what we're really trying to accomplish in life. Like how does the 3 weeks fit into the formula of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu really helps us live a life of MS within this type of world? And I think the best way to approach the question of what is the 3 weeks, besides for just Shavasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, like what's going on here? I mean, it's called Bein HaMitzarim. And the question really is, what is the essence of this zman of Bein HaMitzarim? Right, Bein HaMitzarim comes from the lashon of the pasuk Necha. And what you notice is that we're tapping into tragedy. We're tapping into galus. We're tapping into brokenness. We're tapping into the feeling of having lost everything worth having. And the question is, what are we supposed to be experiencing? Are we supposed to experience the sadness and the brokenness? Are we supposed to try to rebuild it? Are we supposed to try to do both? Are we supposed to tap into the fact that we're in galus? Are we supposed to try to bring the geula? What is the 3 weeks? And what you notice from the word Bein HaMitzarim, if you actually look at the spelling is, it's the same word as Mitzrayim. Right? Bein HaMitzarim, Mitzarim literally means like pain. Tsar also means narrow boundaries. So we're between the boundaries and the straits of these two zmanim. We're between the pain and the tragedy of Shavasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. And we want to delve into what is Shavasar B'Tammuz, what is Tisha B'Av, what's the relationship between the two. It's not just that, the Mishnah basically mentions 5 paradigmatic tragedies of Shavasar B'Tammuz, 5 paradigmatic tragedies of Tisha B'Av. What's the relationship between these two zmanim, these 2 days? But also, what's really interesting is that what does it have to do with Mitzrayim? Right? Bein HaMitzarim, Mitzrayim, what's the lashon here? What's going on here? So if you notice, that's what's also very interesting. The Chazal basically mention how the different lashonos of darkness and chaos, tov, vod, choshech, all these different lashonos in the very beginning of Parshas Bereishis are essentially representing the 4 galios. So we have, all the different galios, we're not going to go into right now. It's a very deep idea in terms of which galios represent which of these lashonos. But one of the galios that's missing is galus Mitzrayim. So why isn't galus Mitzrayim found in those 4 lashonos? And one of the deeper answers is that you have the galus of Bavel and Madai, and you have Yavan, and you have Edom, Rome. But Mitzrayim is not a galus. Mitzrayim is galus. Mitzrayim is the foundation of galus. It's the root of all galus. And part of Tisha B'Av is not tapping into a specific galus. Part of Shavasar B'Tammuz is not tapping into a specific galus. Part of Bein HaMitzarim is not tapping into a specific galus. It's tapping into the root of galus itself. We're tapping into everything that is worth striving for, everything that we don't have, everything that was broken, everything we're trying to reattain. And the question really is, what is Bein HaMitzarim? And besides for just being a zman between 2 points of tsar, 2 points of tragedy, but besides for being between these 2 straits, these 2 points in time, we're kind of closed in within these walls. What's going on here? So I want to delve into this because this is such a powerful topic. And I want to start off by essentially trying to understand what the real tragedy of Shavasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av is, because we're going to delve deeper into it, but on a very simple level. It's not just the fact that this is a time of brokenness. It's not just the fact that this is a time where we had the Chet HaMeraglim, where both the first and the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and Yerushalayim was plowed, and Beitar was destroyed, and literally tragedy. It's not just a tragedy. It's the fact that these 3 weeks were supposed to be something else. What do I mean by that? So the concept of 3 weeks, Shivasar B'Tammuz to Tisha B'Av, you ever think, like, why do we have this concept of 3 weeks? Like, when else do we have that in the Jewish calendar? So we have Sfiras Omer, literally counting Sheva, Shavuos to Shavuos, right? 7 weeks to build Shavuos. We have Aser Smei Teshuvah, the 10 days of Teshuvah, and we have the 3 weeks. So what's interesting is that the Aser Smei Teshuvah and the Sfiras Omer are basically parallel, right? So we basically have 7 weeks of 7, building 49 days, 7 weeks, where we go from Mitzrayim to Matan Torah. We're essentially building from the finite to the infinite. It's essentially Midah, is a gematria of 49. We're counting 49 days of physical, finite, boundaried measure. That's what Midah is, building towards the infinite. And Matan Torah is the experience. That transcendent 50th day is transcendence. That's Matan Torah. It's truth. It's experiencing HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Har Sinai. What do we have from Aser Smei Teshuvah? From Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, 10 days, 7 days in between, 7 weeks, 7. And what do we experience on Yom Kippur? The second Matan Torah, right? When we were forgiven for the Chet Egel, we got the Torah again. So now we have 2 paradigms of counting weeks, counting days towards something infinite, towards something transcendent, and then we have the 3 weeks. We think of the 3 weeks as the most horrible, tragic time in Jewish history. The reason it's the most horrific, tragic time in history is not just because of the tragedy, it's because of what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be the crescendo, the climax, the next stage of Matan Torah. 7 weeks of 7 building towards Matan Torah, then 3 weeks of 7, without getting into the depth and the deeper Torah of 7 and 3 and 10 and what that really means in terms of the lower 7, the higher 3. We're not going to get into those deep episodes right now. But the idea is that the next 3 weeks were supposed to be our transition from that initial 7 weeks towards entering Eretz Yisrael, where we essentially are going to embrace how we're supposed to live a life of Torah mitzvahs, living in the makom, essentially doing the avodah of emes with the place of emes, within the Beis HaMikdash. Kodesh HaKadoshim, Evan Shasiya, living a life of emes within the place of emes. What could be better? And then you have the Chet HaMeraglim. And it's not only the Chet HaMeraglim, it's the fact that Jewish people listen to the Chet HaMeraglim. So you have the Lashon Hara, and the receptacle that accepted was Makabel, the Lashon Hara. So what do we have now? We essentially have the foundation of what was supposed to be built was shattered, and it's the ultimate corruption of taking that which was supposed to be the ultimate crescendo and turning it into the absolute pit of chaos. And here's where it becomes so powerful. So what is Bein HaMitzrayim? So let's try to delve into what's happening here, because there's so much depth here. What was the real tragedy? What was the Chet HaMeraglim? What was the sin of Klal Yisrael accepting the Chet HaMeraglim? So we're not going to go, because we're going to keep this into a very, very short shiur, but we can delve deeper into this in the future time. But we've talked about Chet HaMeraglim many, many times. The Chet HaMeraglim was essentially, the way Chazal put it, is that they put their peh before their ayin. Which means what? The Chet HaMeraglim started on Shavasar B'Tammuz. That was the foundation. They went into Eretz Yisrael and they missaw everything that was happening in Israel. They were supposed to see the Yad Hashem, the Hashgacha, the fact that this was Hashem setting up the pieces for them to come in to build the next stage in Jewish history, to come into Eretz Yisrael. They saw giants all dying. They thought it was a place where the land eats its people. Hashem was literally making that happen so that they were safe. They saw that we were grasshoppers in our eyes. As in everything that they saw, they essentially corrupted their vision and projected what they wanted to interpret onto it to essentially confirm their preconceived notions that we are not ready to go into Eretz Yisrael. We're not ready to take responsibility for living a life of truth. We need to stay within the realm of the Midbar. We need to stay with everything coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Man, the Ber Miriam, the Anani HaKavod. Everything has to come from Hashem. We can't take the responsibility. So they projected onto what they saw. So the depth of Torah is understanding the depth behind every concept. Re'iyah, to see something, is essentially a static reality. Shmiya, to hear it, is to break it down into pieces. When you see something, you see it as it is. When you hear, the vibrations leave my mouth. They go into the air. They go, through this kind of technological mechanism now into your ears. They vibrate into your ears. You translate into sound, into words, into sentences, into paragraphs, and you recreate the meaning. Hearing is a process. So all that the Meraglim saw were what they saw. They projected the meaning onto it and created a shmiya, process that corrupted the surface as opposed to revealed the truth of the surface. That was the first problem. That's why Chazal say that the essence of Shavasar B'Tammuz was a problem essentially in the first stage of seeing. Tisha B'Av was a problem of hearing. Why? Because the Meraglim said their testimony. They spoke their Lashon Hara, which is essentially speaking truth that's designed to disconnect someone from something. That's why when you speak badly about someone, Lashon Hara is not lying. That's sheker. Lashon Hara is saying the truth with the intent to hurt them and to distance the people that you're speaking to from the thing you're speaking about. So Meraglim were trying to distance Klal Yisrael from Eretz Yisrael, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by speaking the truth. They literally, the Ramban explains, they said what they saw. But they said it in a way that disconnected Klal Yisrael from Eretz Yisrael. And the biggest problem was not just their dibur, not just the dibur that reflects their misseeing what they saw, but then Klal Yisrael misheard. As in, Klal Yisrael should have been able to say, we don't accept how you are framing and formulating this. We choose to see it the way Hashem wants us to see it, to hear how Hashem wants us to hear it, but they didn't hear. Essentially, they stayed on the surface, they didn't deepen. So they didn't go into a deeper realm of seeing past the surface. So essentially, Meraglim saw, Klal Yisrael misheard. Very, very deep. That's why Chazal said the essence of Tisha B'Av is mishearing, not using the proper form of hearing. So what's the deeper form of Bein HaMetzarim? So now let's take it a step deeper. The deeper meaning of Bein HaMetzarim is understanding the essence of Meitzar Yam. What's Mitzrayim? So the essence of Mitzrayim is essentially constricting. Chazal say that Mitzrayim means Meitzar Yam. To constrict Meitzar Yam, the 50th, the sea. The sea is endless, the 50th is endless. Why? So we're not going to go into, again, the Maharal talks about this, the essence of the 50th. Maharal opens the depth of all numbers. The essence of the 50th is the essence of the transcendent. Why? Because 8 is Lamala Min HaTava and 50 is Lamala Min HaTava. Why? Because we just mentioned it. Shavuos is literally what? It's counting spheres over 7 weeks of 7 to get to the first of the 8th week. The first of the 8th week is the 50th day, which is what? That's Ma'an Torah, the experience of the transcendent. That's why all 8s in Torah are the Lamala Min HaTava are transcendent. Bris Milah, Chanukah, that's why the essence of Shmona, is Shemen. Also Neshama and Shemaim, all these other very deep ideas, Mishnah. But the essence of Shmona is Shemen. The miracle of Chanukah, which was Lamala Min HaTava, was with Shemen. Right? That's why Shemen, the natural world is built, we're not going to go into all the deep depth right now, but the natural world is built off of 7s. 7 days in the week, 7 lights in the spectrum of light, 7 notes in the musical scale, right? 8 is Lamala Min HaTava. That's why Shava is Sevilla, to be satisfied, full. Shemen, Shmona, is also Shamein. The 8 also means to be fat, to expand beyond boundaries. So the essence of Yam, the essence of living a Torah life is living a transcendent life. And here we'll get to qualify this in a second. Mitzrayim is Meitzar Yam. It's to constrict the 50th, to say we're not connecting to anything transcendent. So Moshe comes to Par and says, Hashem's going to take us out of Mitzrayim. Par says, Mi Hashem, who is Hashem? We don't connect to anything Lamala Min HaTava. We don't connect to anything transcendent. All of their sustenance comes from the Nile. They don't daven and connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to anything. They're essentially living a finite world, unable, unwilling, and really, on a fundamental level, like betraying the concept of the infinite. When Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, the biggest struggle, and this is why every person who left Mitzrayim had to die before before the next generation could enter Israel. The essence of the struggle of Klal Yisrael leaving Mitzrayim was the willingness to accept the responsibility to live a mission connecting to the infinite. That's why Klal Yisrael keeps on saying, let's go back to Mitzrayim. What's so good about Mitzrayim? It's the worst place ever. But it's finite, it's limited, it's where I can live a meaningful life in this world. I can't connect to the transcendent. I can't do that. So what ends up happening is that the essence of living a Torah life is living a transcendent life in this world. So all the mitzvahs are physical, right? Eat matzah, shake lulav, wear tefillin. We engage the physical world, but connect to the transcendent through the physical. We don't live an infinite life. We don't live a finite life. We live an infinitely finite life, a transcendently immanent life. Now, Meitzar Yam is saying, I can't connect to the infinite. I'm only going to live in the finite. But there's truth to it. The truth to it is that the purpose of living a Torah life is not to live a transcendent life, it's to live a life in this world transcendently. But there's 2 ways to live an immanent physical life. One is to say, I'm not going to connect to the infinite, it's too daunting, too much. The other is to say, I'm going to connect to it and then bring it down here. So Klal Yisrael's requirement to keep on coming back down, keep on reverting back to Mitzrayim is saying we want to live in this world. We need to live in this world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's entire message was that's the point. That's why the transition of Matan Torah wasn't to stay in Shemayim, to stay in the transcendent. It was to go into Eretz Yisrael. It was to live an infinite life in this world. That's why the Ramban explains the essence of living a Torah life in Eretz Yisrael is living a Kadosh life in a physical world. It's the most brilliant paradigm of oneness. It's not physical or spiritual, it's both. It's the harmony of the two. It's recognizing the hierarchy, recognizing the physical as an expression of the spiritual, but still living a transcendent life in this world. Meitzar Yam in Mitzrayim is saying we reject the infinite. That's the bad version of Meitzar Yam. Meitzar Yam as a reflection of the Yam in this world, that's the ideal version of Meitzar Yam. Tisha B'Av, Shivasar B'Tammuz, Bein HaMitzrayim, is reverting back to the bad version of Meitzar Yam. It's reverting back to our default, our slave mentality, our Avdus mentality within Mitzrayim, is saying we can't live this transcendent life. We're not good enough. We're not capable. And that's the biggest lie. And that's really what this time became. It became a time of reflecting the brokenness that we self-proclaimed as our identity. As in the essence of living a Torah life is living a transcendent, idealistic, responsible life, pursuing the greatest possible form of truth, of avodas Hashem, of Torah learning, of actualizing your potential, of trying to be all that you are capable of becoming, and no buts or ifs of the ideal. It's only a question of how. Right? A classic Jew does not ask how, but only asks, if it's necessary, I'll find a way. I don't know how I'll do it, but that's not my business. I'm going to figure out a way. But if you're living within the realm of the finite, then you basically make calculations and you say, sorry, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I just can't do that. So what ends up happening is that Shivasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av become a paradigm of Klal Yisrael's breaking of their own identity, and our job is now to rebuild it. And the Bein HaMitzrayim is we're stuck between these two straits. We're stuck in this finite reality that we've created. We're stuck in this constricted Bein HaMitzrayim, right? Constricting to be pain. Pain is literally when something is stressed. It's pushed against. It creates that pain response. That's why when you rip your muscles to build muscle in the gym, it hurts. It's why when your emotional muscles are pushed and pulled to their brinks, it hurts. That's why when you push your mind intellectually, it hurts. Pain causes growth, but pain also rips it apart before there's growth. And yes, there's a good form of pain, but when it's against your will, when you don't realize what it's building, it just feels horrible. So the key is to recognize what this time is all about, what we're actually building. So what I want to do is I want to very briefly go through the 5 things that the Mishnah in Tainus essentially goes through the 5 paradigmatic tragedies of each of these 5 days, of each of these 2 days, Shivasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. I want to briefly delve into the depth of what these 5 are and why they are connected to each of these 2 days. So when it comes to Shivasar B'Tammuz, the 5 things are as follows. The luchos, the original luchos, Moshe broke those original luchos. The tamid, the daily tamid offering ceased to be brought. The walls of Yerushalayim were breached. And the Romans burned a Sefer Torah, and last but not least, Avodah Zarah, a pesel, was erected in the Heichal, in the Beis HaMikdash. What's the connection between these two? Between these 5 things? Well, what's the connection? Take a step further. We'll just briefly say on Tisha B'Av, there was the Chet HaMeraglim. The first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. The second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Beitar was basically the last stronghold, the last hope with Bar Kokhba. That entire city was destroyed. Everyone in there was killed, like massacres. Hundreds of thousands of people died. And last but not least, the site of the Beis HaMikdash was plowed. The Romans plowed that site in Yerushalayim. Okay, so what's the meaning of these 5 for Shivasar B'Tammuz? What's the meaning of these 5 for Tisha B'Av? And what's the connection between the two? So let's start with Shivasar B'Tammuz. The essence of Shivasar B'Tammuz, the essence of the starting point of the 3 weeks, the essence of this entire process of how this unfolds is to recognize the first way that you break anything that's spiritual and that's true is by recognizing that, number one, it shouldn't be able to be broken. You can't count the infinite. You can't touch the infinite. You can't see the infinite. It's not finite. It's not limited. It's not breakable. The infinite should not be breakable. The transcendent should not be accessible. It also should not be breakable. That's why Shivasar B'Tammuz is a paradoxical day. It's where everything that's untouchable became touchable, everything that's unbreakable became broken, and everything that was whole became shattered. And it all starts with the first luchos. Chet HaEgel was literally, there are certain paradigmatic averos in Torah. Chet Adam, the original, also with Lashon Hara, also with improper Re'iyah Chava saw the Yetzadas. That's the original foundation of breaking away of truth. Chet HaEgel, big machlokas Rashi and Ramban, whether it was mamash avodah zarah or whether it was just a minor sniff, a minor form of avodah zarah, because they weren't commanded to build the egel. We see that later on when it comes to the Aron, there were the kruvim that were essentially a different version of the egel, but an ideal version. Kadosh Baruch Hu commanded us. There's a mitzvah to do that. So we're not going to get into all the nuance here. But Chet HaEgel was essentially betraying the foundational connection and commitment to our relationship with Kadosh Baruch Hu. Whether it was actually in a state of actual just shock and fear that we lost Moshe Rabbeinu, we just tried to replace him with something else, or whether it was doing something that we believed to be emes, but doing it in an improper way because Hashem didn't command us to do it. It was, in many ways, the worst thing that ever happened in Jewish history. When Moshe came down, why did he break the luchos? He broke the luchos because those original luchos were no longer the right luchos for us, as in we weren't worthy or capable of tapping into that transcendent Torah. We're not going to get into it right now, but there's many themes in Torah where there's an original ideal, we lose it, we have to re-earn it. So Adam and Chava originally created one, were broken apart so that they can recreate that marriage. You learn Kol Torah in the womb, you lose it so you can come into this world and rebuild it yourself. We're given the original luchos, it was broken, we lost it, because our job is to essentially now learn the lower level Torah that we then got on Yom Kippur, the second luchos, so that we can essentially re-access the original ideal. What also happened when the original luchos broke? The infinite perfect realm of truth became broken. That which is unbreakable became broken. That which is untouchable also became touchable, because now we have to access it through the broken pieces. So what ended up happening is that the infinite became finite. The spiritual became physical. Same exact thing. The carbon tamid, something that's endless. And by the way, something that's continuous. It's like HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates the world constantly, as Nefesh Chaim explains. The carbon tamid happened constantly. There's different ways of something happening constantly. One is that there's a literal continuum where it's not bump, bump, bump. There's no finite pieces. It's just oneness. It's just always. There's no seconds. There's no milliseconds. There's no finite pieces. It's just oneness, infinite. It's like white light. Another approach of consistency, of constancy, of a carbon tamid, is that, and Hashem constantly creating the world, is creation, 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 tamid, tamid, tamid. Boom, boom, boom. It's just always happening. The first is the deeper form. And when that stops, even if it gets restarted, even if the carbon tamid starts again, it's stopped. So something that was literally infinite, not infinite as in a million numbers, but infinite as in beyond finite, became finite. The carbon tamid, our connection to Hashem, which was literally in a different plane, it was just endless, always. There's no points of like yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, just always yes. All of a sudden, it became finite. The infinite became finite. The untouchable became touchable. That which is literally boundless became limited and broken. The walls of Yerushalayim were breached. Without getting into all the depth of Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim is the Makom HaKadosh. It's where we connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the deepest level. It represents something that is unbreachable, unbreakable, untouchable, and that which is unbreakable became broken. The walls essentially surrounding, defending, encasing, and encompassing the essence of who we are, our shield became broken. That which shouldn't be breakable became broken. The Romans burnt a Sefer Torah, number 4. A Sefer Torah is the organic expression. The Torah is the foundation of everything. It's the emes, it's the yesod, it's the foundation, it's our purpose, it's the Ratzon Hashem. It's something which by definition cannot be destroyed. And the Gemara says that when one of the Gedolim were wrapped around the Sefer Torah and were burned alive, he was burnt alive, he saw that the osios, the letters of the Torah, were essentially flying up to Shemayim. Because the Torah can't be burnt. The vessel can be burned, the scroll can be burned, but even that shouldn't be able to be burned. The luchos shouldn't be able to be broken, right? The taban shouldn't be able to stop. The walls of Shalom shouldn't be able to be broken. It shouldn't happen. By definition, it shouldn't be able to happen. It only happened because we enabled it to happen. As in what? And this is the deepest idea. And this is something that Nefesh HaChaim explains. On a fundamental level, nothing spiritually of essence can ever be broken. That's why the osios flew up to Shemayim. That's why the actual Torah v'luchos weren't broken. That's why the actual connection with Hashem wasn't broken. The vessel also shouldn't be able to be broken because it's connected to the essence, to the neshama, to the inner essence. Right? So the luchos shouldn't be able to be broken. The physical luchos shouldn't be able to be broken. The Torah scroll itself shouldn't be able to be burned. It's only once Klal Yisrael does something that affects our inner selves that the outer expression is able to be impacted as well. So it's only because we did something that the luchos were able to be broken. It's only because we did something that essentially was a burning of a Sefer Torah on a deep spiritual level from our perspective of our relationship with Hashem, that the Romans were able to burn the Sefer Torah. So it's only when we do something that someone externally can essentially affect it because they're just essentially expressing a physical expression of what we've already done internally. So they're not doing something new, they're just a physical manifestation of showing the world what has already been done. It's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. We're everything that actually broke it. They're just doing that last piece that creates the external manifestation, and it seems like they're doing it. And the most obvious example is the last one, which is that in Avodah Zarah, Pesach was erected in the Heichal. Nefesh HaChaim explained that was only possible. All these things are really only possible because we already did that. It's when we're not building the ultimate connection with Hashem, someone else can show us the physical manifestation of that. And Maral talks about this in a very deep way. We're not going to go into all the details right now. But they created the disconnect between us and Hashem. They created that Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah is not serving idolatry in the classic sense of bowing down to statues. Idolatry, as the Rambam and the Ramchal explain, and the Maral as well, the Ramban, it's serving intermediaries. It's getting stuck in between. It's like you are not your emotions, you are a self. You're also not your body, you're a self. But your emotions, your body, they're a part of you. The Avodah Zarah, like the different aspects and kochos of the world, in terms of tapping into the power of love, the power of goodness, the power of wisdom, the power of strength, like the Greek gods basically, that's not false, but it's not absolute true. And that's why the Rambam says originally it was emes. They basically were giving kavod to the expressions of the midos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The sheker is when you serve the intermediary as the source itself, when you stop tracing things back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That was the problem. And that's why the essence of everything that's happening right now, what's the problem of essentially putting a pestle in the Heichel? It's blocking our connection to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's blocking our connection to the infinite, to transcendent, to the root, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's only possible because we already started to distance ourselves from that root, from the truth, from the source, from the makam, from the essence, within ourselves and within ourselves from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is essentially what led to Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is not something new. Tisha B'Av is not brokenness. Tisha B'Av is the straw that broke the camel's back. It is the final stage of the destruction of what Shavasar B'Tammuz enabled. Once the infinite becomes broken, once the transcendent becomes finitized, as in not expressed through the finite, but condensed and meitzariyam, to constrict it, to not allow it to breathe, so to speak, to suffocate it, that is when you experience what Tisha B'Av is. Tisha B'Av is just the final destruction of what was already destroyed. Nefesh HaChaim explains this beautifully, that everything that happens in the final destruction is, again, The only reason why the Romans and all the terrible things were able to happen because we already inflicted it upon ourselves. And the only reason why that happened was because of Shavasar B'Tammuz, of the original foundational brokenness of that which shouldn't be able to be broken. So the Chet HaMeraglim, the fact that the Meraglim were in their state, the fact that the Jewish people accepted it, it's like the Chet HaMeraglim was the original brokenness, that they didn't see things properly. But the real, the expressed brokenness was only when Klal Yisrael accepted their Lashon Hara. Imagine if Klal Yisrael said no. Like, what are you talking about? Absolutely not. Eretz Yisrael, Kadosh Baruch Hu told us we're going into Eretz Yisrael. Your job wasn't to see if we're going into Eretz Yisrael, it was just to see how. You messed up. You went on the wrong mission. And what really ends up happening is that the first Beis HaMikdash is destroyed because we destroyed our own inner, the Levi Mishkaneva. We destroyed it within ourselves. Second Beis HaMikdash destroyed, same exact thing. Beitar was our last hope, the last stronghold. As the Rambam explains, the Gedolim thought that Bar Kokhba was Mashiach, and that was broken. Our last hope was broken. The plowing of the site of the Mikdash, where literally it's broken beyond brokenness. It's literally the whole place is destroyed. But what's the depth here? The depth that the destruction is building the foundation for the tikkun, for the rebuilding. Because when you plow something, you're essentially preparing it to be rebuilt. And that's the essence of this time. It's so easy to focus on the 3 weeks and the sadness and the brokenness, and you need to. You're not able to focus on the next thing we're going to talk about until you embrace the brokenness. But the purpose of brokenness is to build something better. The purpose of Yerida is Torah Aliyah. The reason you break your muscle when you go and work out is because you want to build your muscle. The reason you break your mind when you're working on a Tosfos, when you're working on a Sugya, when you're learning, when you're delving into something, is because you want to build something. When you have a disagreement in a relationship, it's because something is broken. And the reason you're having a brokenness in your relationship is a reflection of a revelation of something that just is, but it gives you an opportunity to build something better. And the entire essence of this man is to fully embrace how broken everything is, and how incredible it is, how incredible it could be, what we are trying to build, what we can build, what we should build. Individually, think about the vision for your life. What are you learning? What are you working on? What are you thinking? What type of relationships are you building? What type of impact are you trying to have on Klal Yisrael? Who are you trying to become? What are you doing with your life? And then we start to expand, and we're part of a family, we're part of a tzibur, part of a klal, part of a community, we're part of Klal Yisrael. And yes, so many different aspects of Klal Yisrael all coming together with their own tafka, their own unique emphasis on their hashkafic element of how we're going to build, how we're going to become the best we can be. And once Klal Yisrael becomes one, once you recognize that there's a reason for the sinos chinim, is because we're all struggling on what's the path of emes. I must have it right, and therefore you must be wrong, and because you're wrong, I have to hate you. But the moment we realize the 12 shvatim, there are different pathways, and the moment we recognize that each of them are important, everyone's tafkid is important on an individual level. Everyone's hashkaf is important on an individual level. Once we come together and recognize we're Klal Yisrael, and that we're supposed to build something. Yes, Klal Yisrael became broken beyond broken, and there's 150,000 types of every type of Jew, and everyone thinks that they're the best type of Jew, and everyone thinks that everyone else has no idea what they're talking about. But the moment you realize that there's so much truth to what you have to say, but there's also so much truth to what you don't even understand about what they have to say, that's when you start building avas chinam, of saying, I genuinely want to build something amazing, and the way you build something amazing is like music. You take different notes and create music. Art, you take different colors and create art. Klal Yisrael was always designed to be very diverse and very unique and different. But the beauty of Klal Yisrael is when those pieces come apart to individualize and self-actualize, and then come together to create something infinite. And the brokenness of Jewish history, the brokenness of Shavasar B'Tammuz, the brokenness of Tisha B'Av, the brokenness of the 3 weeks, we're always supposed to be building during these 3 weeks. We're always supposed to be building towards the Gula, towards coming into Eretz Yisrael and living a life of emes, a life of Torah, a life of truth. The moment we say, yes, this zman is a zman of brokenness, but l'tzorach aliyah, for the sake of building, for the sake of becoming, for the sake of trying to see how far we can go, and that's when life becomes extraordinary. And that's when you can smile within the brokenness. That's where you can have nechama within the churban. And that's where you can really delve into what this zman could become, not only what it should have been. And that's where we start focusing on, now we start thinking about goals. Now we start thinking about who we're going to become. So we should be zoche to tap into the essence of this zman and become everything, on an individual and klali level, everything that we're capable of becoming.